place, gonna give you what you want. See, something is over, shy or don't be. Can't you know something that's so good. Why every time I feel that Tina always switching up the mood. You love us, we true, you can't hate it. Thank you, fiction. So, let's also like the way they make prediction. Anti-zero, better pressure, they know they feel it. Truth anti-evolution, number one, they hate to see it. If you relate, now the fun and now and all I pay. Chana anti-tate, got on my bed, Chana anti-rape, watching your shoe my head, I'm so chocolate. Kitty cat head, don't say they call me kid, I never melt in the heat. It's my God, to lower to 20 million, go to Bumbalos and no good cause. My fiction in the place, gonna give you what you want. See, something is not shy or don't be. Fiction in the place, gonna give you what you want. See, something is not shy or don't be. Fiction in the place, gonna give you what you want. See, something is not shy or don't be. Fiction in the place, gonna give you what you want. See, something is over, shy or don't be. What's my mind? Really on the way. Exhale. Away. What's my mind? Really on the way. Know yours, something you want to see, something you want to see, something you want to see. It's almost like a dog.
Good afternoon, all you humans on the internet, and thank you so much for joining us today for the fourth installment of the Rosefest Community Conversation series in partnership with LifeLine. My name is Ashanti Kunene, and as always, I'm your hostess with the mostest. If this is your first time joining us, for context, The Rosefest Community Conversation Series seek to create spaces for us to engage on difficult topics in an open and honest and candid manner, where we move past the point of simply problematizing towards actively sharing insights and solutions with each other to help each other heal. So with us today are an amazing group of people who will take time to introduce themselves when we start, but quickly, we have Lebogang Kgothadi, who is a brand strategist for UMG Brands and Artists. We have Buhle Ngaba, who is an actress, a speaker, arts and theater activist. We have David Sonnenberg, the director of Diemersfontein Wines, and also has a professional background in clinical psychology. We have Sanele Gaqa, who is a corporate affairs strategist and also the former head of the Beer Association of South Africa. And last but not least, joining us again from last week, Sinikiwe Biyela, the director of LifeLine, who are our partners in bringing you these conversations. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today for this very, very spicy conversation. Because today, guys, we're looking at the intersection of patriarchy, alcohol, and gender-based violence. And what is clear is that there is a direct link between alcohol abuse and gender-based violence in the context of our very, very patriarchal society. And as a country, we have one of the highest alcohol consumption rates in the world. And in the Western Cape specifically, alcoholism is a legacy of the dope system. So from a historical point of view, if y'all remember last week, we were looking at the history of violence. Alcohol can be seen and was seen during apartheid as a systemic tool of racial control. And then to complicate the issue further, we have an incredibly patriarchal society where patriarchy and the imbalance of power between genders has created what some have called an unspoken of war of men against women, and also a generally violent society where we are emboldened by bottles of liquid courage that act as catalysts for us to take out our pain and take out our frustrations on those closest to us and those around us, rather than deal with our issues. So we're going to be looking at this, and we're also going to be looking at the balance between individual and industry responsibility for alcohol abuse. There's been a renewed push for government to adopt the draft liquor amendment bill, which essentially proposes 4 key changes. The first, increasing the drinking age to 21 years. The second, the introduction of a 100-meter radius limitation of alcohol trade around educational and religious institutions, because apparently having a bottle store next to a school makes sense for us. The third, banning of any alcohol sales and advertising on social and small media. And fourth, the introduction of a new liability clause for alcohol sellers. So this is what we're going to be looking at. And most importantly, as with all the Rosefest conversations, we are also going to discuss the ways in which we can break the cycle of alcohol abuse and how it exacerbates gender-based violence, because patriarchy refuses to fall. But before we get into it, a few house announcements. We are recording our community discussion as always, and we'll be posting the video to YouTube for archive once the live session is over. If data is a concern, please tune in via YouTube, as it's more affordable than Zoom. If you have any questions, use the Q&A in Zoom or the comment section on YouTube. Our team is on hand to field your questions. And then lastly, please make sure to like, follow, reshare, tag, hashtag Rosefest 2020 in all your posts. Please and thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our guests to please tell us a little bit about themselves and to answer the first question for today, which is, and Buhle, you can start here. Do you think that as a society, we are on the same page about our relationship with alcohol, given how differently we've reacted to the banning and the unbanning and then the banning and then the unbanning of alcohol during lockdown? Do you think as South Africans, we are all aware that our relationship with alcohol needs urgent attention?
Hi. Firstly, thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you, Hostess with the Mostess, for introducing us and bringing us all here. Very exciting. As you said, I'm very excited for what is sure to be a robust conversation, surely. By way of answering your question, you know, it's such a difficult one because I'm so happy that you mentioned it from the jump, because I was going to go straight into historically, you know, where we come from. Because in answer to that question, I was going to say that, look, I think that we can all certainly say that we are definitely all aware to some degree, as you said, most recently because we've been playing chessboards there, or rather we have been the pawns that have been, sometimes it's open, sometimes it's not. And you've seen everyone's responses to this. So we're clearly all aware. I would also say that, for example, we're all aware that in December in South Africa, you know what I mean? Kadi nice time, Kadi December, all of a sudden, we all anticipate quite literally that the incidents, the accidents, the violence is all going to go up. We all anticipate the same for long Easter weekends when people are traveling home, you know. So I think that it would be wrong to say that we aren't all in at least the same book, you know what I mean? Maybe not all on the same page, but we are in the same book. And I think that in a lot of ways, you know, what this means is, I think that, for example, as young people, we don't study enough Black feminist theory, let's say, like Mam Ellen Kuzwayo, who herself identified, you know what I mean, the breaking of the African family system, whatever that may mean to you, but which then inevitably ended up in, you know, so-and-so goes to go and work in the mines. Then there's leadership. That's what we fail to acknowledge, you know, is that, sure, this person might be gone, but then the woman comes up and then we've got leadership, you know. And in and amongst all of that, you know, and I think that this all ties in this conversation, you know, as we said, alcohol, history, herstory, acknowledgement, where are we, why are we being punished simply for existing and for being strong enough to carry a system that hasn't looked to carry us. I think
sure. No, thank you. That's fine. But before I let you go, you didn't tell us who you are, Gail. Just a little sweep. I am.
Hi, everybody. My name is Buhle Ngaba, and I am an actor, a writer, a speaker, and an arts activist. I feel like this time is kind of been made for me. I don't know if that's relevant to say, but maybe that's because I'm sure many of our audience might feel the same, that we are in the middle of a global pandemic and we are all grieving a lot. But for some of us who didn't have a lot before, to be very honest, we know that the resources are here now, you know, as small as they may be, we know how to stretch them all the way.
Yeah,
so basically,
no, thank you.
We can do it either with 10 million or nothing, but I'd prefer 10.
No, thank you, Buhle. I want to pass to Sanele, please, if you could introduce yourself. I see you thinking deeply there, sir.
Not at all. Thanks, Ashanti, and thank you for having me on here. I'm Sanele Gaqa. Currently, I'm the executive chair of a company called Strategy Execution Advisors. Basically, what we do is look at organizations and help them develop strategies and then how they execute on them, especially when working with the public sector. I also am a consultant at Sakika Solutions, a company that builds bespoke solutions for specifically in the informal economy around field force management and how to operate in that tough environment. And I'm currently dabbling in the informal economy, in the township economy. And what has happened then, because the township economy is predominant, the businesses that you find there are all liquor based or have a link to liquor in some way. I find myself coming back into this alcohol conversation because I used to be the CEO of Beer Association of South Africa, as well as used to work in the alcohol industry. So about this question, I think I'm going to take a slightly different approach than Buhle. I think I want to ask ourselves first, when we talk about society, who are we talking about? When you ask, are we on the same page on our relationship with alcohol? Who actually are you talking about? Because if you think about, there's the consumer, okay, that actually consumes the product. Then there's the manufacturer who makes the product, right, and benefits commercially from the product. Then there's the retailer. In our instance, it's the informal retailer. It's a shebeen who's not licensed. Then there's the formal retailer, which is your big wholesalers who are urban, who we all know about. I'm not going to mention names because they're not paying for sponsorship yet. So, but I think you know who they are. They redistribute to these businesses. Then you have government, right, who's supposed to be looking out for the interests of civil society. Then you have NGOs. Then you have civil society itself. Then you have the mother of an individual who consumes the product and ultimately ends up in an emergency center on a Friday night because they've abused the product.
So if you look at all those people and start asking them, would they be on the same page in terms of, do we have a problem with our relationship with alcohol? I think you get varying answers. And I think that's why Ashanti has brought us here today is, it's almost difficult to think that we could all be on the same page when we all have very different interests around this product. So if you had to ask me, do I think we're on the same page? I think there's a lot more there are a lot more questions to be asked first before we can say, do we look at the definition of the World Health Organization, where they say binge drinking is drinking more than 4 or 5 drinks per sitting? Now, and if you do that, then you have a problem with liquor and you have a problem with alcohol. But then I ask you, having grown up in the townships, where you're not supposed to touch alcohol during the week because you're supposed to have a productive week, right? You're supposed to be engaged in the economy and be productive. And then you've had a full good week, then let loose from Friday night until Sunday and really have 5 to 6 drinks to 7 to 8 to 9 at a sitting, which then would fall squarely under binge drinking, which would mean then you have a problem with drinking. Would he say that he has a bad relationship with alcohol? Talk about the rugby fan who will have more than 5 sittings at one go at a rugby game. Does he have a problem with alcohol when he's been dry the whole week, but on a Saturday he watches Super Rugby and a couple of rugby games and really engages in the product and gets. So I know I haven't given you answers, but I think we need to ask the question a little bit more carefully. Do I personally think that we are on the same page? Definitely not. And I'll end there and let the other speakers.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sanele. I mean, it goes back to what Buhle said, that we're all in the same book, at the very least, all in the same book. Mr. Sonnenberg, I want to bring you in here. Do you want to come introduce yourself a little bit and tell us your view on this question? Are we on the same page? You must unmute yourself, David, please. Technology, guys. There you go. Yay. No, come back.
Okay.
No, I don't know what's happening. No, Dave.
How's that?
I got you, yes.
You got me? Okay. Sorry about that.
No
Age means being technologically challenged. So, folks, hi, good afternoon, and thanks very much for having me. I think this is such a interesting and fantastic and challenging, difficult subject for all of us. And those of us who are in the wine trade, probably doubly difficult. And my own sense of my own position here is that I've got quite a few conflictual situations in the sense that I make my money from selling wine. And I also employ nearly 70 people in doing that. So there are all sorts of things which I think has come into, all sorts of elements of that have come into the public discourse in the last few months with the lockdown, etc. Just a little bit more about me. I trained as a clinical psychologist at UCT and then did some work in psychotherapy. But I suppose my real interest has been looking at how people develop, the environments from which they come, how children grow up, developing attitudes, securities and insecurities. And I think when we talk later, the whole issue of patriarchy and how damaging that is, has its origins in early childhood development, and perhaps we'll have a chance to talk to that. So, if you like, I'm this sort of polyglot psychologist person. But I have to say, my love has been Dimersfontein, which is a third-generation estate. We do quite a lot there, including a partner company called Thokozani. We run a school, and I like to think that in a sometimes unreconstructed industry of farmers that in the distant past used to do the DOP system and be part of that very oppressive system, you know, we try to be enlightened in a difficult society in which enlightenment isn't always easy. So that's a bit about me. I think my colleagues on the panel have really answered the question about, is there awareness? And yes, I do think there's awareness. Perhaps in some distant parts of the country, you know, people don't really understand the impact of it. And one of the tragic manifestations of that is how young people and young women drink during pregnancy and early pregnancy, and you have fetal alcohol syndrome and some of these, you know, really awful correlates of the abuse of alcohol. You know, the constituency that hasn't been mentioned, of course, is the illegal trade and the people who took such advantage of the lockdown to make a serious amount of money, as they did with cigarettes and all of that. But, you know, so whilst we hope that the more enlightened bits of our society are sympathetic to the sort of things we might be saying this afternoon, we also know that there are a huge number of people who opportunistically made use of the illegal trade. Of course, there were wine farmers selling during lockdown. And, you know, we were asked several times to participate. It's not something, you know, I wanted to do. And frankly, although there were elements to the lockdown that were, shall we say, a little bit heavy-handed perhaps, or unnuanced, you know, we had to respect the spirit of this is actually occupying hospital beds and all sorts of other things, including GBV. Okay.
No, thank you so much for that input. I think it just highlights, you know, do we value the community over our own personal self-indulgence? And Lebo, I want to bring you in here if you can introduce yourself and talk to us what you think about the first question.
Hello, everybody. My name is Buhle Ngaba, and I'm the Senior Brands and Partnerships Manager at Universal Music Group. Basically, my division is the creative agency within a record label. So we foster a lot of, you know, solutions and relationships between artists and brands. And because of the nature of the industry, we've got a lot of alcohol brands supporting music, or at least the culture. And the thing about going last is everyone says what you might have thought. So just to touch on everyone's point and what I think, definitely as Buhle opened up, that we you know, we've got the same book, but each chapter is different. Each chapter resonates different to all of us. This is a very layered topic. There's no one answer or at least one solution or one problem. We also need to take in consideration the fact that we live in a country where there's socioeconomic problems, you know, so people have different relationships with alcohol. Some might be just a social, I'm just going to have a drink after a long day because, you know, the likes of Sanele want strategies really. Some are going to go for a weekend job because they haven't seen their friends in a while. Some use alcohol as a vice, literally to survive, because they feel like they can't operate without this liquid in their system. So there's so many layers to it that each chapter of this book speaks to different, you know, topics of it. And you know, I feel like we're all aware of it, but some might, you know, I might speak more on this chapter, you might speak more on that chapter because it just resonates with where you at, with your environment, etc. During lockdown, I mean, again, as David mentioned, there were illegal trades. There were people hitting us up, do you not have a connect? There were people selling because maybe they might have had events planned during lockdown, for instance, weddings, whatever ceremonies, and they bought alcohol prior, and the alcohol's just sitting there, and they're just selling. Then there were people who were in desperate need to drink because they can't function without alcohol, literally because no one imagined COVID to hit us the way that it did, right? So you get people who've never spent more than 5 days at home. You get people who have never spent time with the people that they live with, right? You get people who stay alone, who feel like, oh my God, I'm alone. I need something to at least like keep me sane. And they fall on alcohol. In my space, we do a lot of campaigns with artists and alcohol companies, but obviously in a very responsible manner. And it would speak to whatever, a different strategy that maybe the company needs. Maybe they want to acquire more customers, maybe they want to retain, they want brand awareness, and those things also contribute to the conversation. It might seem like it's all on a professional level, but it also contributes. And in the line of work that I do, we never take anyone under the age of 25 to do a big alcohol campaign. You have to be a certain age in order to engage an audience speaking about alcohol. And we all know that when you post on social media, there would be that awareness of drink responsibly. But do we drink responsibly, or are we just doing that for ambiance, just to act, like we're doing something right? So we speak a lot, but our actions are not really matching the messaging that we put out. And I'll leave it there because we're going to delve in more into the other questions that Ashanti will ask.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Lebusini. I want to bring you in here, talking about, alcohol as a vice and not being able to cope, and the different manifestations of alcohol abuse and dependency from a LifeLine POV. What are you seeing?
Good afternoon. Actually, on the first question, Ashanta, I'm agreeing with all the panelists from what they've just said. I think that's the beauty of speaking last, because you just agree with everybody else. I think there is a lot of awareness in terms of alcohol, especially if you're looking at states that shows that South Africa is one of the highest countries when it comes to alcohol consumption rates in the world. So, I mean, most of us are aware of that. And as Buhle indicated right at the beginning, that people even anticipate what might happen. However, from LifeLine points of view, we see that there's a lot of disconnection between alcohol consumption and then its impact afterwards. So people are aware of alcohol and the fact that certain things might happen, but there is actually a disconnection when it comes to impact. And I think a lot of that happens because of different things. For example, for starters, when Lebo was talking about those television adverts, when those adverts are there, they portray alcohol as a cool thing. They actually not portray anything negative that could impact the societies or the families badly. So every time they use the superstars, and whether they football players, whether they movie stars, but they are portraying this coolness that actually comes with drinking alcohol, which for me, that's first for that message, it's misleading, because it makes everybody else think actually it's cool, and therefore they don't look at the impact of it at a deeper level. But also alcohol has been promoted in communities, and it's been normalized basically even in families. There are no functions. If you go down to townships level, all functions that are being done there's always alcohol. Even at the funeral, they have after tears, that will have alcohol. So if you have function that does not have alcohol, it's actually seen or viewed as boring, as the function had no vibes. So actually the entire alcohol thing has become number one. Doesn't matter what function you're doing. So what messages are we sending to the young generation, to our youth in those communities about alcohol? So again, that's why I'm saying we are reading the same book, but we're not thinking deeper in terms of what messages are we sending. I think during lockdown, we all know that there were so many people that had no food. We had a lot of clients at LifeLine that had no food. Government and NGOs and companies were donating a lot of money towards food parcels. But on day one, when alcohol ban was lifted, there were long queues of people going to buy alcohol. Where they got that money from? Because yesterday they were crying they had no money at all. They were starving. The next day, there were long queues and they were singing, dancing, happy songs. It was shocking. And it was both women and males that were standing in those long queues. So again, that tells us how communities have actually prioritized alcohol even over their own food that they need to eat. So alcohol takes priority. But also, because I do talk to people, most of the times when I see them drinking, I always ask them if they understand why they need to keep alcohol at bay, if they need to keep that certain percentage in their bodies. You know, every time I ask them that question, they tell me, no, I have to keep it at bay so that I don't get arrested. They never say I must keep it at bay so that I'm healthy. So that relationship with themselves and health does not exist. They never tell you, I need to drink 2 glasses or 3 glasses so that I remain healthy as a person so that my liver doesn't go. It's never about them. They're fearing of being arrested over their own lives. So for me, what worries me is if they don't even put their own health first, there is no way that they will put the health of their families or others in the community as far as alcohol is involved. So the moment you talk about alcohol, everything is forgotten. It's about drinking. But also what is disturbing for us at Lifeline and the work that we're doing on gender-based violence, alcohol has been one of the enablers of the patriarchal system. And also it has actually helped patriarchy to strive even further, which has contributed to a number of cases of gender-based violence. So that we will talk about it later. But for us at Lifeline, people don't actually put their own health first, let alone the health of other people and the people that they love when there is alcohol. So alcohol creates it kind of like kills everything and it becomes number one in their lives.
Sure, Sini. Oh, you are dropping bars here. But I mean, speaking about the relationship between ourselves and health, this is what you're saying, you know, the relationship between who we are as people and our health. Why do you think we accept this? I mean, like earlier we said that there's this anticipation of increased violence around December, around Easter, around the holiday time, because, you know, going to drink our youth, we're going to finish and eat our youth with this alcohol, right? But why is that? Why do we accept this? Why are we not giving this relationship more attention? I mean, if we know already that alcohol abuse leads to increased violence in our society, whatever its form, why are we not giving that more attention as a society? Dave, I think I'm going to give that to you, and then other panelists can join. Unmute yourself, please, say.
Well, you know, it's a very difficult and uncomfortable thing to answer as to why we don't pay enough attention to it. I mean, there are so many things in our society, you know, which sadly, for all sorts of reasons that we all know well over the last centuries, you know, we've become a fairly conscienceless society in some ways, whether it's about how we treat each other and how we treat a variety of different social ills, how we've tolerated, you know, the worst motor accident statistics, how we've tolerated lawlessness, you know, in our attempt to develop as a society. So I think this is just one of the things that we neglected, and we shouldn't feel cool about that, you know. So I do think that that in this society, alcohol is unfortunately kept going through a number of circumstances that people have already alluded to. And I think one of them is to do with issues of male identity and the general level of well, let's not generalize. Let's just first of all take it in context. Only 37% of South Africans drink alcohol, adults. But the proportion of that 37% that abuse alcohol is unacceptably high. So I wouldn't want to quote the statistics exactly, but it's an unacceptably high proportion of drinkers that do binge drinking. So you could say that for the people who don't abuse alcohol, plays a very enjoyable part in people's minds, and that is the people for whom the portrayal of alcohol as cool, is directed. But certainly we don't do enough about pointing out the dangers. Some of that just may be vested interests in the alcohol industry, because after all, we have a range of people who would have varying degrees of conscience about alcohol damage. We can't always blame the big corporates for their bottom line orientation towards the sale of alcohol. But historically, there are a lot of people who earn their living out of alcohol, some not earning much of a living at the moment, and therefore becoming a lot more unscrupulous. So I think it's got, so many different layers to this, the personality of the people, the dysfunction about male identity that comes from so many different strands. And I think those are some of the things that keep this going, and that stop us really undertaking it as a problem in the country.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think what is clear is that this is a very multi-layered, complicated question and issue and problem. And you can't touch on one thing without touching on another. And so, Buhle, I want to bring this to you. Why do you think that we're not giving this too much attention? I mean, we are anticipating violence and we seem to be fine with this. Why is that?
Because once we start to look, then we're going to have to keep looking, and it's too boring to keep looking. As you said, we'd much rather just be having a good time. You know what I mean? And I'm only answering, that's in specific answer to what you are asking me now. Why do I think that we don't pay attention? Just because once we had, as I said, once we have to start looking, then we have to start investigating more and more and more. I also feel like Sinikiwe brought up such a good point there by pointing out that even at after tears, you know what I mean? It's something that's considered, yay, it must be there. Otherwise, literally, your after tears is not a vibe. You know what I mean? It's really, really crazy. But I think that for me, what I would say that's scary, that's also a step further is, I feel like Sanele brought up such a good point there, because it is so hard. So for example, the point about how, what if you have somebody who works hard the entire day, or the entire week, and then on Saturday, you decide to loosen up. Shup, agreed. But then the problem is when it is that uncle at the after tears who now has released and decided to have 8 drinks, but now I feel uncomfortable, you know what I mean, as somebody's daughter, child, or niece, because this person has chosen to have that 8 on this Saturday. And so I agree. I can't say you have a problem, because then everyone's going to argue with me and say, no, but so-and-so works here and is so good and blah, 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 which is fine and is not contested. But if you're making me uncomfortable in this scenario, it's such a difficult thing, and I'm obviously not saying, again, it's not the whole time, it's not everyone, but if we're looking at issues of patriarchy and we're looking at alcohol, I suppose, as Ashanti said, we can't separate one from the other. So for me, I'm like, okay, what's that one step further? And then I think about, the rugby guys, the Owens maybe, and I think about what that meant for me, let's say at 17 years old even, as a young femme girl, what I saw that space as, and also how I regarded that space as a space that I wasn't welcome because it wasn't for me, because I'm not old enough, fine, but also a space that scared me slightly, because that is where I would see the people in my life who I regarded as keeping me safe, as that's where that line suddenly becomes blurry.
Oh, sure. No, thank you so much. I think it also just speaks to again, the whole thing of community safety over, individual indulgence. And similarly now in COVID, wearing a mask in public versus not wearing a mask, is the safety of the community more important to you than your own personal comfort and indulgence, So Lebo, I want to bring you in here. Yeah, man, what do you think about this topic, about how we're not giving this enough attention?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to saying, this is multi-layered, right? And some factors that I think, or elements we need to bring in, is also social status, right? Because with alcohol comes, some people aspire, when you're in high school, you might drink the cheap drinks. You go to varsity, you get the not so cheap, but also not expensive, depending on how much your parents, how much allowance, or maybe you've got a job on the side. And then when you're a young professional, now you want to go to the big boy drinks, So there's a certain aspiration that alcohol, advertising, and just like conversation has brought forward to say, when you're drinking this drink, it means you're poor. And then this drink, it means you're rich. Now it sets you at some kind of social status. Now you go to the club, you can only afford a 6-pack of X brand versus someone who's popping bottles. You might get a guy who gets aggravated because Lebo doesn't want to go drink his 6-pack and wants to go pop champagne. Now patriarchy also comes in. Now the gender-based violence also comes in, because now, I don't know how, but people feel like, now I've got power over you because I can afford a certain brand or cognac or, a spirit. And now we're going to have fights because you left my table to go to this person's table to drink this certain. So and it sounds very petty, but that is the reality of where we're at. It comes with classism, it comes with social status, it comes with power and authority of, I've now made it, I can now buy the whole club, the drinks are on me. Oh no, I can't go out because it's not payday, I can't afford this brand. What will people think of me? So it's such a, it can be very subjective of an answer and objective as well at the same time. But I feel like we mustn't omit those kind of examples that I just made. And I mean, also alcohol companies, it's a business. At the end of the day, they want to sell, it's sales. Okay, you can put forward campaigns and do advertising, and at the end of the day, bottom line, how much are we selling? Sales say sales. During lockdown, or at least like even before, when you hear a truck is turned over and people went to go fetch, whatever on the highway, that also contributes. Like, why can't you just leave the poor truck alone and people do their own thing? People are just like, oh, at least I can save my 50 Rand. And what else? Sinikiwe said that, like, also priority of what matters. I'd rather starve, but I can go get a bottle of X.
That is so profound. That is so hectic. I'd rather starve than not have my alcohols. Guys, we have a problem. Sanele, I want you to come in here, because this thing makes me very happy, because I see you're deep in thought. Your mind is turning. What do you think about what this lady has just said? Hey, we'd rather starve than not have alcohol. Come on.
Yeah, look, I think we all know there's a direct link with high levels of consumption and incidents that take place, whether it's GBV or road traffic accidents. So, there's a direct link. And if you refute that, then there's a real big problem with you. So I mean, and I've got stats of a work I did with Western Cape government under the alcohol harm reduction game changer, where we saw a direct link at the Khalicha hospital from a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And Lebo, that's where your clients target. They their consumers, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So I mean, those are the occasions that are targeted by manufacturers, and those are the days that are targeted for consumption, and there's a direct link with the emergency centers being, inundated with incidents. I think the stats were around 70% of incidents that came into an emergency center on a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, and a Sunday in Kalicha had alcohol in them, whether it's the victim or the perpetrator. There was alcohol in them. So I think that's quite clear. Is there enough attention given to it? I think there might be, but what are the solutions? I think we disagree on the different solutions. The manufacturers have different solutions. They believe above the line based campaigns where we bring awareness. Government has got the curbing or reduction of alcohol consumption on the weekends. So I think we have different solutions on how to deal with it. But I think the biggest problem is us being, and I think Buhle answered this. She said, we know what the problem is, but no one wants to talk about it, right? Because then we need to be vulnerable at some point. So what I'd love to see one day, and I know I've got a long life to live, but I still hope for this, is be in a room with the manufacturers, captains of industry, be in a room with the politicians, be in a room with civil society, and then everyone is for one day, just one day, that one meeting is vulnerable and really talks about what the product, when abused, does to our communities, and what each and every one of them should be doing for the interest of the community, not my interest as a manufacturer, not my interest as a politician, not my interest as a civil society NGO who's trying to, all of us, we say, guys, we want to put the community at heart. What do we all think we should be doing around the space? That day, when that happens, we'll come up with real solutions. Because personally, I think the solutions come or need to be at the retail space. Because alcohol abuse doesn't happen in those manufacturers' head offices. They don't happen in hospitals. They happen at the retailer. Is a critical component in reducing alcohol abuse and alcohol and even the violent incidents. A lot of them start at the retail space. A lot of them. Then they end up at home. But they start where? At the retail space.
Where you can buy it. Sure. No, thank you so much, Sanele. I think again, what's being highlighted over and over that I'm hearing is this thing of community health and safety over individual or company self-interest. This keeps coming up. Sini, I want to bring you in here as the last before we move on to our third and juiciest question.
Thank you. I've been listening nicely to all the panelists. I think it is definitely a difficult question to answer in terms of why are we not pushing back, and if people are aware of this, why attention is not given. I think there are a lot of people that know that alcohol and gender-based violence, it's there, and they know that alcohol contributes a lot into the incidence of gender-based violence. Even at LifeLine, we know that 65% of there's 65% correlation between abuse and especially the intimate partner violence abuse, as well as the family. We also know that most of the cases that we get, sexual violence cases, 72% of sexual violence cases that are reported to LifeLine, mainly the perpetrator was under the influence of alcohol when that happens. Not that the perpetrator was completely drunk, but was under the influence of alcohol. And we saw it again when the lockdown was uplifted and the alcohol ban was lifted, where our statistics when it comes to gender-based violence was doubled within 2 weeks. So again, that confirmed that alcohol has serious contribution in terms of gender-based violence. And we also noticed in terms of when these incidents happens, for example, they tend to happen a lot over the weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We see them during Easter weekends. We see them when we have long weekends. But also we tend to get a lot of our clients calling us at midnight or calling us early hours of the morning, sending us Facebook requests for counseling because they've been beaten up, or even reaching out to Lifeline through counseling. That happens a lot over the weekends and in the wee hours of the morning. And you could see that by that time, the perpetrator is fast asleep. And that's why the woman has a chance to actually write to us so early in the morning requesting help. Now, the difficult question is, if we know alcohol actually contributes so much to gender-based violence, why there is no pushback and why there's little attention paid to it? My theory is we all live in a patriarchal system. And I always look at the patriarchal system as a master's house. Men in mostly alcohol benefits them, whether it's the alcohol industries, most of them actually are actually owned by men. So if you look at the patriarchal system and the fact that the master of the house or of the system is a man, people that are living in that patriarchal system or in the master's house are expected to behave in a certain way. Let's say in our patriarchal system, it's a house, it's got a master. As somebody who lives in the master's house, whether you're a woman or a child, you are expected to behave in a certain way. And if you don't follow the norm or what the master is expecting, there are actually a lot of chances of that person being punished somehow. So I think people are very scared, first of all, to push back because they know there will be negative consequences if they push back the master, because there is a master in this patriarchal system. Whether we see the master in a family setting or the master at a community level or a master at a societal level, if we're saying patriarchal world, it means we have masters there. So it's not easy for people to actually push the master because there will be consequences if they do that. So unless they always try by all means to appease the master, hoping one day they will be at a master's mercy and the master will stop abusing them. So they try to use different ways. For example, woman will be cleaning up after the man after he's been drinking and leaving all the bottles lying around, because she's hoping that by the time he wakes up and the house is spotless, this man will have mercy on her. But sometimes that's not always the case. So people always think that if they don't act or if they pretend, the problem is not there, the problem will go away. But in reality, the problem does not go away. And what alcohol does, in fact, it gives people that are consuming it false bravery or false braveness, because they become actually very brave. Even men that wouldn't normally abuse a woman, once they've consumed alcohol, they become so brave and they start either abusing them verbally or physically, but also there's a lot of financial abuse that goes with it because the money goes to buy alcohol in terms of paying school fees or buying food for children. But we've seen this, as we said, we need to tell the truth as well. As Lifeline, we've also seen this affecting even women. Women that drinks alcohol also tends to have that false braveness, where they will take a risk that they would not normally take if they were not under the influence of alcohol. We're not saying when women are drunk, they should be raped, but sometimes they'll be walking alone at night from a shipping that is actually a few miles away from their homes and walking to get into their homes. And in that process, they get raped. So for me, alcohol gives people false braveness that actually makes them do things that they wouldn't do. We've had a lot of cases coming in at Lifeline where our young girls and young women, especially the age that goes to varsity, they'll go to bashes and they will be having these parties and there'll be a lot of alcohol. Then they all sleep in the same room, both males and females in the same room, and they're not dating. And then boom, some of them get raped. And when they come to Lifeline, they say this is what they did, and they didn't think they were going to be raped. So again, the fact that they were raped is completely wrong. It should not have happened. But they were also brave to be in that same room with a stranger that they didn't even know, and they were sharing the same kind of like bedroom. So alcohol, again, is to be blamed. because somebody who is not under the influence of alcohol will never share a bedroom at night with a stranger, somebody that you just met in this party, and you end up actually sharing the same room. So I think for me, alcohol, it's like we putting, if somebody puts fuel on fire and hoping the extinguishers are going to come and put the fire down, but the person that is putting fuel hasn't actually switched off the fuel tank. So I think alcohol is like that fuel tank. The tank is on, and we're hoping all the role players, the organizations that are working in the space of gender-based violence will put the GBV down, but the tank that is fueling it, which is alcohol, the tap is running, nobody's closing that tap, and we're hoping mysteriously gender-based violence will actually go away until something is done, and it's not going to go away. And I think lastly, I just want to say, it will take an individual, Ashanti. As much as we would love to see the community taking one big solution together, but I know it will never actually start at level. It always begins with one person pushing the boundaries, pushing them very far, and then other people learn from that person and they start to copy that kind of behavior. And before we know it, we'll have more people at the community level pushing the boundaries. So actually it begins with one person that will be trying hard to change what it's so-called a norm. And I'm hoping the platform we're having today, the Rosefest, had actually made this wonderful opportunity available so that all women out there and girls will also utilize the platform to learn to push the boundaries, because unless we push, change will not happen. And surely it will not happen overnight. And surely nobody wants to start, but we're all complaining about the problem. So we all need to start from somewhere and start pushing until the entire society is pushing towards the same direction.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. I don't even know what I must pick, but I think for me, what resonates, speaking about pushing the boundaries, right? And then also speaking to how, alcohol is positioned as this cool thing, this thing to aspire to, how it, there's so many nuances in terms of how this thing affects us as people. And we had somebody in our team who said something so profound. He said, we're looking for brave alcohol brands, not just smart advertising agencies, right? So the question then, tying into also what Sanele said about, the day everyone can get into a room, we'll have a proper solution. What does an integrative sustainability strategy look like then when it comes to alcohol and the alcohol industry? Because gender-based violence is an urgent social issue. And if we are authentic in saying we want to solve the issue, we also need to talk about the long-term sustainability of the alcohol industry in terms of, does it enhance society or does it exacerbate our issues? So what would something like that look like, a sustainable strategy for this industry? Sanele, I want to start with you there, and then we can go to Dave.
Look, I think, again, it's this concept of coordination, right? I think a strategy would certainly have the key players, which is manufacturers, government, and civil society, maybe. Those three key players working together. Now, I understand for various reasons, they can't work completely together on everything, right? Because they're conflicted. But there's certainly things that the alcohol industry could do themselves. I mean, they could clean up the retail space because they've got the muscle to, and when you're dealing with these solutions, and what's actually compounded this issue of them not taking ground is when you look at a solution that you're not in complete control of. So, for example, if you are government, you can't try and play in the retail space. You don't have the control to do so. And the other way around, if you're the industry, you can't play you shouldn't be playing in schools, or you shouldn't be playing in an environment where you might be seen to be coming into, I don't want to say that word, I'm going to be careful, yeah? This is recorded and it's live, it's live. But I mean, don't go into a space where you'll be seen to be conflicted, and secondly, that you don't have full control of. Go play in a space. I mean, why the alcohol industry doesn't play in the retail space is beyond me. Why can't they go into a tavern? The very same tavern that they are able to dominate and control in terms of pricing and they should exercise the exact same control and domination over responsible trading. Why can't they do that? They can tell you how much you should buy, when you should buy, and in what brands, what variants. They should exercise the same amount of dominance and power when they're telling you, if we see you that you are redistributing, we'll close the tap on you. We will, because they've got that information. Similarly, with so there are things that I think the various parties, government, the manufacturers, and civil society can do for themselves, right? And they should be doing themselves. Then there are the places where they should be collaborating, and I think that's what an integrated strategy looks like. It is, and don't be afraid to be exposed, you know. But you know, having said that, I do think, and it's sort of unfortunate that it's taken a global pandemic, but I do think that the alcohol industry is somehow now starting to see that the writing's on the wall, right? And government can, with a pen, can shut you down. Because the government says that, right? But have they ever done it before? I think they did it to the tobacco industry, but you're never quite sure of the power of government until a global pandemic hits you. Then you really see the government can shut us down. So I think now they've seen that, and I think now they're really available and coming forward now and saying, talk to us. Let's start dealing with the issue. And like I say, it's unfortunate that it took a global pandemic for this, you know. But I think an integrated solution is everyone around the room. People are vulnerable, and people stop waiting and just coordinating. Like I don't think shutting down Shebeens is the right thing to do. I think because there's a livelihood. We've got great stories coming out of Shebeens. People who have been raised, who have gone on and done great things. But I do think in the current manner, it's not sustainable. I also think that if you look at Shebeens, and I don't want to take this conversation down a road where it shouldn't go, but if you look at what's happening in the townships, those areas were supposed to be dormitories. That's what the legacy of the previous regime had intended to do. So there are no economic hubs. If you're in a township, you cannot run a business. So now what do you want people to do? And I mean, I don't think people should run alcohol businesses, but that's all they know. If you're in a township, you know how to run a taxi business or sell liquor or chisanyam. I think we should diversify the businesses that are in townships, okay? And I think government can play a massive role there. Government must go in and I'm going to be controversial here, but if you look at the spatial planning in our townships, what has the new government done in changing the spatial planning that was in place in the previous regime? What have they done?
Oh, townships now you're asking very, very difficult questions.
Townships are still dormitory. I mean, there's no economic hubs. They're not driving economic opportunities, and they're not actively seeking to deal with it. And I think if a Shebeen would diversify and sell a little bit more than just alcohol, guess what? We have a booming economy, booming businesses, and the level of consumption is controlled. But I'll let the other panelists also engage on this topic.
No, thank you. Now you're asking big questions. You know, I mean, you could ask the same for a lot of things. Dave, I want to bring you in here. What do you think about the balance between individual and industry responsibility, and what do you think a sustainable integrated strategy solution would look like for this problem? You're fine. Your mic is on, I think.
Am I next?
Yeah.
Well, Sanele said some very interesting things. I think my worry about expecting the formal structures of distribution of alcohol to be the ones that are responsible. I mean, I think that's a partial solution, but as we've already seen, people who really want alcohol are bypassing it, or worse still, they're substituting it. You know, when you think about other ways in which addicted people, and many of them are, addicted. Some are social drinkers, obviously, who, as Sinikiwe says, wouldn't be the sort of violent people if it wasn't for alcohol. And I really think there is a category of that. But there's also, unfortunately, a large group of people who are addicted or personality disordered or psychopaths or whatever, who have been in the news lately and doing these appalling things. The mass murderers, the people who I suppose are psychologically vulnerable, can't stand rejection, etc., and they murder their ex-girlfriends who've given them the push and all those kind of things. Those are very profound elements of the problem that we're dealing with. But to get back to, how does retail impact on it? They can do some very good things, I think, in the sense of warnings about alcohol damage, restricted hours, etc. But at the end of the day, if alcohol is seen as, if you like, culprit number one, and the only culprit, then I think we're probably on a hiding to nothing, because people are going to find their way through to something which, if you like, fuels a predisposition to violence, or a predisposition to feeling inadequate as a male, or the hatred of others in their lives, or women in their lives. And so, if you like, I'm making a case for the venture that we've set out on here this afternoon to be a little bit more multidimensional, in the sense that if you don't look at, if you look at alcohol primarily as something that fuels or accelerates an underlying process, then it's perhaps easier to come to terms with it, because it's not every person who gets drunk attacks women, and so we mustn't sort of oversimplify these things. And I'm trying not to be an apologist, obviously, for alcohol consumption, because I think any responsible brand owner tries to do their best to, and clearly we don't do enough. Let's put that on the table. But we can't be apologists for it, and therefore an integrated approach which we're looking for has to start with awareness of our complicitness in the problem. And we are complicit in some sense, but we are complicit as part of a whole raft of other social problems. If it wasn't for alcohol, it would be tick, heaven help us. Okay, and we also have huge amount of assaults in the Western Cape because of tick abuse. So one worries about trying to, if you like, overly scapegoat one industry without looking at the whole issue, the predisposition of the men in our society to be violent, and work together in some sort of totality, in a holistic way. And I think the solution has to do with a very, very difficult enterprise in our society, which is, how do we, and some people are doing it and trying very hard to do it, but to look at how young men develop, how are they educated, how are they loved? Does the problem start with the awfulness of kids growing up without good parenting, good mothering, or in some cases, even more importantly, good fathering? So, I'm not trying to deflect away from alcohol's culpability in this. I'm just saying, if we only fixate on that element of it without looking in a more broader system, we may not be as successful. So what we really need is how do we bring up more well-adjusted boys and well-adjusted girls, and girls that are able to be more assertive and defend themselves in the face of threat. And those are the developmental issues that I think have to be seen in parallel with doing something sensible in terms of alcohol control. We're not going to, prohibition didn't work in the States. Okay, it ain't going to work here. In fact, so we must give up on that in terms of saying, you can't have your sweeties. People are going to find it. And the best we can do is to make sure, and I do like the Duncan's challenge about can we find braver brand owners to stand up for some of these things, and I think we all have to enter that space if we can.
100%, David. Thank you so much. You said something so interesting. So I think for Lebu, touching on what Dave said now about, that we're looking for braver brands and not just smart advertising agency, looking at the balance between individual and industry responsibility. If you can come in there. And then Buhle, for you, I've written it down, but David said something so powerful. He said, we also need to look at the predisposition of the men in our society to be violent, as opposed to not just the alcohol. So Lebu, if you can come in with the brave brands, not just smart advertising agency, when we're looking at now individual and industry responsibility.
I mean, right now, brands are also trying to act like people, where they have a tone where it's not, forced or by this, it's more of an engaging kind of tone that they're trying to get, so that the consumer can also engage back in whatever platform or however, right? Do we need brave brands? Absolutely. I mean, we've seen what Black Label has done. We've done fantastic advertising but advertising and creative or impactful messaging only does so much. I feel like this is a group assignment. Everyone needs to play their role, from individuals to organizations to the government to because we're very quick to point fingers. It's whoever's fault. It's this organization. Government is not doing this. Da, 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 da. But you're not looking back at yourself. What am I doing? I might be a hypocrite, and I'm the one saying, but this brand didn't do this, or government didn't do this. But I'm the one jawling every weekend, and I'm just going, mindless. Listen, I'm the one giving people shots, because when you're not drinking, you're seen as boring, and so it's really a group assignment where we each need to take part in this assignment of bettering the situation that we're in. And it's so deep rooted, Ashanti. This thing didn't start last year or 2 years ago. Literally, our forefathers, I feel like, had the same problem. Maybe now it's more exposed because of the, of technology, or what we, as you grow up, you kind of see certain things in a different way because you have more understanding and experience. So it comes from, family values as well. Some families can all sit and drink together because they feel like you don't need to hide it that you drink. There's some families where when we all here together and my mom or dad walks in, we all have to hide the alcohol because what are you doing? It's and I keep going back to these little examples because they also contribute so much, because the smaller the actions, they grow in time and they contribute to this issue that we're discussing today. So we need to kind of go to the deep root of it. And I mean, again, organizations and brands, at the end of the day, it's a matter of sales, your bottom line, doing the right thing, careful messaging, being responsible, putting disclaimers, da 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 da. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm going to go back to saying it's a group assignment and we all need to play our part.
Sure. No, I hear you. Thank you for that, Lebo. Then Buhle, I want to bring you in here, and then Sinikiwe. So talking about what David had said, that, there's a general predisposition of the men in our society to be violent. And now what Lebo was saying, that this is a group assignment. This is for all of us, because it's the women that raise the sons, right?
No, I'm in complete agreement. And I think that the only response that I would have is to repeat what David said, earlier in the conversation about maybe raising better little boys, or actually, no, let me not put it that way, because no, our mothers are doing their job, okay? Like our mothers are doing the damn thing.
They are.
I do think that we can look at what David said, which is very specifically early childhood development. Really, really engage with that, I think would change a lot. I also think, I know it may sound silly, but still, when Sanele was like, let's sell more things, you know what I mean? Goteven. I was like, yes, let's put books in there. You know what I mean? Let's give Sabata, Letepole, whoever, you know what I mean, an opportunity to also engage in a different way, so that we're also forced to spotong, and we're sitting there, how we're drinking also now changes, because we know, that this kid could come by in this way, and this is what we need in that way.
100%.
So for me, that's about it. And also the final thing that I just wanted to say was by way of, I can't remember who mentioned it, but I think it's really important to point out, and yes, it's true. Sales of liquor, a lot of it is about it being aspirational, the kinds of lives that we're looking for. I think that I also wanted to point out that in a lot of ways, though, I feel like the alcohol industry to me has started to feel slightly better, specifically as for me, a person who identifies and is a woman, because I feel like there are a lot more senior brand managers who feel like they could be female. You know what I mean? It feels like there's a step up of female energy that's going in, that's more welcoming, that makes me feel like I can have different types of drinks. And, Black Label is not just Malume's drink.
Yes, tell them.
You know what I mean? In that way, I can start to feel that teams are starting to change. And I think Sinikiwe said it's all right when she said it is the individual. And sometimes it is that individual in the team who's like, but guys, no, man, come on. Can we please do better? I agree. I feel like we do have to question ourselves, but we also have to see when we feel like things are maybe starting to change slightly. And just to close, I know I'm not going to mention names or say things, but I know that for me, for example, there are some women specifically in the South African industry who have branched out by way of alcohol. And for me, in a lot of ways, it's felt very aspirational, but not necessarily because I can go and buy the bottle, but because the fact that you can do this thing is huge, And so I'm waiting for the day when I will be able to afford that bottle. And then when I do get that bottle, it will be that one. I will take a photo of it and I will back up your marketing all the way. Because for me, it's about the fact that you are this presence within this industry. So for me, by way of marketing, you know what I mean? There is a way that we can balance that aspiration in a way that pushes us all forward.
No, thank you so much. No, I completely agree. And Sini, I want to bring you in here just as the last piece for this question, and then we're going to close off.
Thank you, Ashanti. I think for me, when we're thinking of sustainable strategies, I think for me, the main one, it's really to delay alcohol introduction to both boys and girls, because it seems like the age of them being introduced into alcohol is getting younger and younger and younger. As much as we see a lot of adverts saying alcohol is not for people under the age of 18, but in reality, we're seeing a lot of young boys and young girls consuming alcohol. So I think for me, if we really want to win this battle, how do we delay introduction of our youth to alcohol? Secondly, I think what causes them to actually get introduced, or why they are being introduced to alcohol at that tender age? Could it be that it's things that has to do with peer pressure? Could it be that it's issues around situation at home, anger issues? what is it going on that makes young people actually take alcohol at that early age? If we could figure that out and try and come up with programs that will actually stop the introduction at that age, because we all know that at that age, actually they don't normally see the risk. And it's at that age where they get addicted to alcohol. By the time they're adults, it's actually at times late for them to reverse and come out of it. So ideally, we should really be delaying the introduction into alcohol. I think also linked to the age of starting alcohol, even that age 18, for me, it doesn't sit well with me, because why would you even want to sell alcohol to an 18-year-old who is unemployed? We know 18-year-olds, some of them are doing matric or they had just finished matric. So are you telling me that when they finish varsity, they'll be already deep into alcohol? By the time they get their first salary, the only thing they're going to be thinking of buying, it's already alcohol, because they were introduced to it from the age of 18. So ideally, the introduction age should really be pushed to a point where the person is working. Because where are they getting this money from? If we're saying it's for people over the age of 18, it means they're 19, but where 19-year-old gets the money from? Most of them are unemployed. So why are we even promoting a 19-year-old to start drinking when they have no money even to buy that alcohol? So for me, it's all crazy. I think the age, for starters, it's actually very, very wrong to introduce alcohol. I think the second thing I really want to raise, it's the whole issue of the alcohol industry accepting the impact that alcohol has caused in our societies, not only when it comes to gender-based violence. It has contributed into many social ills. We can count HIV and AIDS, car crashes. There are so many things that has happened, and you find that in the middle of that, there was or there is also alcohol. So I think the alcohol industry needs to really take full responsibility, and they need to stop shifting the blame to the user. Because even some of the messaging, as much as I know that we're trying, for example, the thing that says drink responsibly, for me, you're still saying it's the responsibility of the user to be responsible while consuming this product. But if the user is 19, how responsible the 19-year-old is going to be when they've been given freedom to actually go and get alcohol? So how? Because we know they're still at varsity, they're still studying. So for me, the messages are also, they're not 100% right. It's something that we really need to look at if we are serious about it. But I think Lebo alluded to certain things as well, like the family norms, what happens into the homes. For me, the whole thing of, even if alcohol is being consumed at home, we know, we always say, sometimes it's better to go drink at home than drinking in taverns or shipins. But you know, when, especially in a situation where both parents are drunk and kids have to clear up those alcohol bottles. When I sit in the interviews with the children and I ask them, especially the teenagers, when you sit down and ask them when they started drinking alcohol, they started from drinking those little things in the bottles when they were collecting bottles to go throw them outside. You know, that little drop in the bottle, they were drinking all those things from way back. So they were already introduced to it by parents when they were drunk and they've passed out on that couch. So how are we going to, in a way, protect the children that are cleaning up after their parents when they've passed out and they're clearing all these bottles and they don't taste alcohol? Because during that process, they also wonder why my father and my mother are always so excited after drinking this. What is in this bottle that makes them so happy afterwards? Children, as we all know, they're curious human beings. They're curious. They want to taste it and they want to know what's going on. And by doing that, they get also hooked. So the cycle keeps repeating itself. I think my panelists have said some of the things, but I would also say I would like to see one day alcohol adverts being banned on television, like how cigarettes was banned. I think alcohol was banned unless alcohol is going to be, those adverts are going to be showing real impacts of alcohol in people's lives. So, but I think actually it should be banned on national television. the price should increase so that 18-year-old or that 19-year-old can't access it. So if the price has been pushed up, it will mean only people that are working, that have income, that can access alcohol. If we're serious about reducing it and reducing the availability of alcohol in the communities so that there are less incidents, we should be serious. We should really be pushing the price up so that it's not going to be easily available. And I think also...
I need to jump in here because we've got 10 minutes. I see that the spirit moved you and took you. Thank you so much for the buzz you were dropping there. Price must increase, guys. You heard the woman. So, but we've got 10 minutes left. And to close off, I'd like your concluding thoughts, because that's also the direction that you were going, Sinikiwe, and concluding thoughts for this. In terms of how do we now break the cycle? What is the way forward? What is the best way for us to move forward in a healthy and responsible way? Just to wrap up, everyone's got 2 minutes for us to make the time. Okay.
Quickly.
2 minutes, quickly.
I think it would be nice to see celebrities holding those functions and those parties without alcohol, because many young people, they're looking up to those celebrities. So if we're serious about it, I think our celebrities in South Africa, they also need to lead by example and start having parties that are not so much about alcohol. And I think also we need to make sure that alcohol industries should really have programs in communities that are aiming at educating young men and boys so that at the end of the day, they do not perpetrate violence. So women and girls, I will say to them, they must push those boundaries, those patriarchal norms, they must push them. And as much as men are socialized to believe that men are the heads of the family, I want to say to women and girls out there, we are the neck. If the neck is stiff, the head will not move. So if we can claim our power back and realize that as women, we are a neck, we can be stiff and push those boundaries. And because we are the enablers of the patriarchal system, I would say, please, let's not enable it. Let's make the neck stiff so that the head can't move. Thank you.
Thank you. Lebo, would you want to come with your concluding thoughts and how you think we can break the cycle of alcohol abuse and patriarchy and GBV?
Yeah, I was Sinikiwe like dropped bars and bars. I'm just like, what am I to say? But really going back to when we started, we spoke about us being, having the same book that has so many chapters. I feel like, we all need to just take time to read through each chapter and take it one chapter at a time and solve one issue at a time. And, sometimes we try eat everything at once rather than dissecting bit by bit. An elephant, you just take little bites. And if you take that little bite and chew it properly, the next bite will be even better. So let's take time to read each chapter of this book that we speak of, and really dissect and find solutions, because again, there's no blanket solution to all these issues that we've pinpointed. But there would be some progress in taking it one bite at a time.
100%. Thank you so much. Buhle?
Much the same as what has been said. I just want to say thank you so much for the platform, to all of my panelists. Thank you so much. I've definitely gained I feel a far wider, healthier perspective of what the situation actually is, which is really, really, really wonderful. By way of Sanele also pointing out to me that there are many different people over here. I'm obviously aware of that, but to hear about them in that way is so incredibly important, because then I start to see the push and pull and the politics that work in between. Similarly with David, Sinikiwe, and all of the incredible work that she does. Lebo, thank you. Lead it, babes. Take us there. Really, really, thank you, everyone. It's been incredible. The biggest thing that I would say was when you are sitting there with your boys and you're having a good time and all of you start to get excited, like Sinikiwe spoke about, that excitement that you start to get, mind each other at that point. It's at that point where you must mind each other, because what's fun for you might not be for someone else in that space.
Halala, thank you so much for mind yourselves. David, please, concluding thoughts.
Well, You know, I'm delighted that we've had this conversation, because I mean it's from the time I was invited onto the panel, you know, it's actually got my mind working in a new way. And in a way, I think those sort of provocative experiences have to happen across society, and to all the role players. And I mean, you all in your different, and we all in our different constituencies should keep this discourse up. You know, I mean, you'd be surprised to hear that I actually agree totally with Sinikiwe about the prices going up, but the prices going up shouldn't come to the producers. We make enough margin, or reasonable margin as it is. But I had a thought during the last few months, which I wasn't quite brave enough to espouse to too many of my colleagues or fellow producers, about the price going up. Because I actually think that government should impose a significant additional excise tax on alcohol, and that should go towards a fund, preferably not administered by government, because we've had a few bad experiences. Sorry to make light of that. I mean, it's a bloody disaster. But if government could put around on every bottle of every spirit and every can of beer, and that got handed over to a civil society grouping of people, and I'm too old to do this, but a lot of you around this table are young enough to do it, and to say, guys and girls, let's spend money on creative meetings, interactions, which can begin to heal the society at its fundamental.
I'm going to email you. Don't worry. I got you.
Okay.
I like.
So you know what I'm saying? Don't let this go, because in a way, you know, I'm just thinking, and I don't know why this came to mind, but the energy that went behind the sudden rise of the anti-colonial discourse in this country is rather similar to what we should be doing now, except this time we mustn't blame the colonialists. They've got a certain amount of things to answer for. We know that. But actually, we need to look at the people who are collusive with all the destructive things in the society that form part of what's going on with gender-based violence. And I think that every community, you know, really has to look to its own complicitness in how gender identity is reinforced, how its origins are determined, what the influences are, and that requires a lot of focused research. And I think some of it is being done. I wish I was more expert in knowing what is happening, but I think you know, go for it, guys and girls.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. And a final concluding thought, Sanele.
Cool. Thanks, Ashanti. So I think for me, it's just I think we need to do more and talk less. I think we always engaging, dialoguing on this issue, and I don't think we're doing enough. And I think we should just start. You know, we always trying to get it right, trying to find the perfect solution. I think we should just get going and start and start doing. And I really think we should be practical and look at real impactful programs that we can measure the impact of on the ground, and then proof of concept, and then we sort of scale up. So, and I think this is always going to be a difficult conversation, because if you just look at this panelist that you've got here, Ashanti, right? If you had to take us and say, guys, here's is R1 billion, just this panel, just this group here, and say, how would you solve this issue of alcohol abuse? I can guarantee you for free, Sinikiwe and I would not come up with the same solutions, okay? And I can tell you, if you're looking at this, you have a manufacturer, although David is obviously a nano manufacturer, he's not at the scale of the guys I'm talking about. But I mean, you would have a manufacturer, then you would have Lebu, who's salaries is paid on the back of manufacturers, right? Because she's working for these great brands. Then you have Sinikiwe, who's dealing with the real impact of the problem on the ground, right? She sees the real, she's at the cold face of it. And then you have Buhle, who's an actress who could be on both sides of it, right? Because acting is possibly paid for by depending on where she is. But then you have me, who's working in the informal economy, who says, I think this whole issue of dealing with alcohol draconianly is actually a marginalization of those living in townships. That's actually how I see it. Because it's fine for me in Tamboerskloof and in Constantia to have my wine at 12 o'clock during the day, but geez, God forbid someone has a beer at 12 o'clock in a township, right? But I then write the policy and say people in townships can't have their drink, but I can have my red wine at 12, or white wine, whatever it is. Sorry, David. I don't know which one is drunk at 12 at midday. But the point I'm making is that you could take this very panel, and I can tell you, Ashanti, you would battle for us to get started and start looking at real solutions. And a panel as small as this, if you gave us the funds and the resources, we would battle to agree on how to get started, because I don't agree that we should increase price, not yet. I think there's other things that need to happen first. But my point is, this, good luck, great conversation, but you've got a very, very, very big thing to solve, and I hope we can solve it one day.
And I think on that note, just to say, I think a lot of things can be solved if we're all on the same page in terms of what the vision is for a society. So if we are all in agreement that we want a healthier society, I think we can find the tools and the solution and the will to implement whatever that is. But thank you all so much for your time and joining me today for this very interesting conversation. It's such a complex and nuanced conversation. We didn't touch on everything. And thank you all to all of you who watched us. Join us again next week, Sunday, same time, 3 o'clock. We are going to be looking at culture, religion, intergenerational conversation. It's going to be lit, y'all. It's going to be lit. Thank you so much again to our panelists for joining. Have a good day, everyone. Ciao.
You